Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at ConTinual. I'm your host, Gail C Martin, and tonight we are talking about Supernatural's scariest episodes. So grab your popcorn and your pie and settle in and be ready to get spooked. We're going to talk about it all. But first, let's have our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carole.
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes. I am a Supernatural fan since season 3. Started writing fanfic in 2012. All of my fanfics on AO3 under Firesign 10.
And Anne.
Hi, I'm Ann Wicker, and I was a latecomer to the Supernatural fandom, but went totally down the rabbit hole. And I just got back from my very first Supernatural convention, which was a great time. And I'm a former journalist, and I edit and write books. I edit books and write on my own, and I've co-authored a couple of books, and here we are.
Yeah. Lola?
I don't know what's going on with my video. I have it hardwired in. I don't know. It's just being funny. My name's Lola Lariscy, and I'm a writer and been a fan of Supernatural since 2005. Been a fan of Jared Padalecki since Gilmore Girls. So I've seen him grow up in front of my eyes. And other than that, just trying to keep my video from being bouncy.
Okay. Melissa.
Hi, I'm Melissa Edmundson. I'm a lecturer, mostly with a literary background. I've been a fan of the show since the beginning, and I'm really interested in how the show works with Gothic tropes and monsters and ghosts and things like that.
And I'm Gail C Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all the modern worlds are ones that Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. I fell in love with the show halfway through season 11, binged 11 seasons in 4 months in time for the beginning of season 12, went down the rabbit hole and haven't hit bottom yet, and I hope I never do. So that's me in a nutshell. One of the things that had me at hello when I came to the show, admittedly late, people had said, oh, Gail, you'd love this show, but I was busy, I didn't get to it. Finally said, let's see what the fuss is about. And I fell in love with from the first episode. And one of the things that had me at hello was the spookiness. Not only did you have these two amazingly good looking and talented guys, but urban legends and ghosts and monsters and all this lore rooted in folklore. I mean, it was like, where have you been all my life? This is where I belong. And I love the horror roots in the show. So everybody's got their favorites that creep them out. Let's find out what yours are. Carole?
Well, I find a predominance in terms of entire episodes that spooked me, probably mostly in the first 5, because after that we tend to get into these large arcs that were less about the spooky and more about these long arcs of storytelling. Mm-hmm. But in the first 5 seasons, I particularly liked Provenance. I thought the haunted painting was super creepy, and the little girl was even creepier. But that was an awesome one. Same thing with Playthings, partly because when you have spooky kids, it's really spooky, and so the whole thing where we didn't realize that other little girl was a ghost, and the way that the dollhouse was reflecting or foreshadowing what was happening, that was super spooky to me. In a kind of a more realistic sense, we have the Benders, which is super spooky because they're freaking people. Mm-hmm. And along with the real people thing, No Exit, I thought was pretty creepy, where we're dealing with this ghost of this serial killer, and he was nasty. And when Jo wakes up and she's in that little space and clawing at him, that was, to me, that was really spooky. So those were certainly among the spooky episodes for me. Probably All Hell Breaks Loose Part 1, just because once again a lot of demon stuff's going on and we don't really know what is what. Skin, first time we saw shapeshifters, and he was nasty. That's an episode I almost can't even rewatch because it's so brutal and gory that I just really can't watch it again. You know, I can just watch little bits of it. So, but certainly things like, and Melissa, I think you really touched on it when you talk about like Gothic and stuff. I love that kind of steeped in, you know, the atmosphere, like with Playthings in the Inn and Provenance and that painting and stuff, that kind of really deep rooted, creepy, you know, is really, really good for me.
I think it's important to note that Jensen has said that Playthings was the episode that scared him the most. And then his loving wife bought a porcelain doll and moved it around the house without telling him where she was putting it, so that he'd be surprised by it when he came around the corner. I think, you know, that's key to a good marriage, is always keeping it fresh.
Well, the whole room full of the dolls was so creepy. And I was reading about that episode today, and apparently Jared also took some of the dolls and put them in Jensen's trailer. Because
of course he did.
Yeah.
Love it.
And that episode also, they were pointing in Super Wiki, they were pointing out the sort of, not really Easter eggs, but the things that harkened back to The Shining, with the two little girls, the scene where Dean goes into the bar to talk to the dude, the old dude, and there were several other things that they talked about that were harkened back to The Shining. And then the old lady in the attic, Psycho.
Yeah, that was just a well done episode. And I think that, you know, there are a lot of ways you can say the world is divided into two people. I think one of those divisions is people who like porcelain dolls and people who are creeped out by porcelain dolls.
And marionettes too.
And ventriloquist dummies. I think they all go together. Yeah. Somebody gave one of my daughters a porcelain doll, and I didn't find out until much later. She had put it in the farthest corner, top of her bookshelf, and she had actually rigged booby trapping so that if it came alive, it would knock other things off and she would have a head start to get out of the room. And it's like, why didn't you just tell me? I would have made it disappear.
That's really clever. That was a really clever way to deal with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
She booby trapped her own room so the doll couldn't get her. I mean,
Yeah, someone gave me a creepy clown doll when I was little, and I kept moving it out of my room and putting it, like, I don't want this thing in my room. And my parents finally got the message and got rid of the doll. I don't want it in my room.
My other daughter had a Furby. Remember when those were popular? And she swore it still talked when you took the batteries out. And one morning we woke up to find it in the dryer. She had just decided to get rid of it, and she stuck it in the dryer in the middle of the night. It went away then. Yes. So, Anne, how about you? What's on your list?
Well, I have to mention the pilot, The Woman in White, because that was one of the very first ghost stories I ever heard. My mother told me about The Woman in White on a road in Greensboro, North Carolina. I grew up here in North Carolina, and my mother lived in Greensboro for a time. And so I had heard that story about the woman getting in the car, you know, since I was a kid. And I was just like, oh my gosh, when I saw that first. And not that it scared me so much, but that it was a real touchstone for me in growing up, hearing in North Carolina, we've got the Mako light, we've got the Woman in White, we've got the Brown Mountain lights, the Devil's Tramping Ground. I was raised hearing all those stories. And so I have to mention that. Playthings was certainly on my list. And then the one I think that scared me the most was the Benders, you know, and when Jared just is like, or Sam is there in the cage and he goes, they're just people. But it's got one of my very favorite lines from all the shows: demons I get, people are crazy. You know, that's just, And that's really, I mean, crazy people really scare me. Another one from the early seasons is the Scarecrow one with, you know, dude, you fugly, and just the idea of the Scarecrow coming alive. You know, other than the Scarecrow and the Wizard of Oz, it's that's kind of a creepy thing to me. Scarecrows are creepy to me, so that really hit me at home too. But I also had to point out a couple of later season shows. Although I have to step back just a minute, and the Scarecrow one was directed by Kim Manners, and he, I think, had that sense of creepiness and scariness and what made things like that really hit you. You know, that he honed that in when he was directing and writing for the X-Files. So there's that. One that scared me a lot the very first time I watched it was Red Meat, where Dean thinks that Sam is really dead, and it's the werewolves and the guy who has been bitten and then becomes a werewolf, and Dean, you know, takes all the pills and dies so he can talk to Billy and get her to bring Sam back. And I just thought that was really creepy, and he was Sam friggin' Winchester, you know, coming back alive and doing the thing. And I also have to mention regarding Dean, where Dean is losing his because of the spell, he's losing himself. And that one scared me in particular in a different way, because my mother had dementia and I saw her losing herself. And when he's looking in that mirror, trying to say his name and who his brother is, to me, that is just devastatingly scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because we don't always get scared by the same things in each scary episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lola, how about you?
Before I start, Anne, I'm sorry about your mom. I had the same thing. My mom had dementia, and I just had to listen to her just not really remember basic things. And you know, she knew who I was, but she didn't always know why she was where she was and stuff. It was tough.
Yeah.
I have two. There are a lot of really scary ones, but two that I was thinking about today. They're both from the first season, episodes 9 and 10. The first one is called Home, and the second one is called Asylum. And you may remember why the title Home just puts a chill down my spine if you watch the X-Files also. Just the title Home already gets me to 50% grossed out because of the X-Files. I'm like, no. So I'm already set up to be like horrified. And I don't remember if Kim Manners directed this one, but I know he was a producer on it. I'm trying to get to IMDb, but obviously my bandwidth is not doing great right now. So, but Home, what I really loved about Home is it kind of has a poltergeist vibe. And when I was a kid, poltergeist scared the ever living mofo out of me, because I was only like maybe 8 or something when I watched it. And you got the scary clown, and in this episode there's a scary like tambourine playing little animal thing. And you've got Loretta Devine. I forgot how great she was in this episode. She channels Zelda Rubinstein from Poltergeist. She's got that soft, melodious voice. Now, Dean, you need to do this, and honey, you need to do that, and you're just like, ah. And Dean even makes a reference to Zelda Rubinstein, saying she already Zelda Rubinstein the place. What do we got to worry about? So they acknowledged that they really had the poltergeist vibe going, and it was scaring the ever living crap out of me. I mean, if you were ever a kid and had a closet and had to look at that closet and just know something was going to come out, you just knew it, and you kept thinking you saw the door rattle and no one was there and it was dark, and you know, it just evoked all of those childhood fears. I loved it. That's one of my favorite episodes. And also you get to see Mary, and that might have been the first time we saw John at the end. I think maybe. And just the close-ups of John, you know, I was really marveling at how much he looks like Dean. Just the eyes and the shape of the face. He really did great casting with that. And so it kind of had that nice heart moment at the end when, you know, you see John. But man, it was scary. Oh man, it freaked me out. And Asylum, even though I'm pretty sure this episode predated American Horror Story, it was just like the Asylum season of American Horror Story. You've got the scary dentist looking chair and the mad scientist who's doing experiments on patients in an asylum, and the ghost of the asylum patients are there. And oh man, it gave me the willies. It's not even so much that it scared me, it gave me the willies, and it just made me go ew, ew. And that just, oh, that you get your money's worth with these two episodes.
Okay, Melissa.
Yeah, I want to touch something, Anne. I'm also a North Carolina native, and all of those stories you mentioned, those urban legends, are familiar to me. So, but I think that brings up a great point too, because actually most of my top picks are going to be from the first season as well. But I think that's so fascinating because, you know, we have, you know, I wanted to do this particular panel because the scariest is so interesting to me, you know, and I couldn't wait to hear what everyone else had to say, because it's so subjective. You know, like we said earlier, you bring into it, you know, what you're afraid of. Like if you are, and I'm talking from experience, I don't like dolls. I've always been, you know, creeped out by them. So, you know, I'm going to tend to find those episodes, you know, scarier. The clown, you know, everyone loves the clown, that episode. I'm going to find those types of things scary, but in those urban legends, it's so neat because it's almost like we bring this like collective, like this culture and this collective fear, you know, so we add that onto it. So I think the urban legends are so interesting too. And I mean, it's fascinating to me that it was something I kind of wanted to explore maybe too in this panel. You know, why is it that this first season, it does have, you know, I think kind of the best, right? The scariest and the best, and what happens kind of like after the first few seasons and you get into that bigger narrative, right? And it's almost like the definition of scary kind of changes in a way. Like we go from those individual stories to like being scared for Sam and Dean, you know, like what's going to happen when, you know, Dean becomes a demon or that type of thing. And like, I don't know, it's like the definition of scary kind of changes as the seasons, you know, go on. So anyway, that's my little spiel about that. But it was kind of hard. I was trying to come up with like a list, and I think I keep going back to Family Remains as that's what I come back to as like for me the scariest. I think it was in season 4, Gail. I think I'm season 4. And that's another one where, you know, it's not a ghost, right? It's a human. It's a real person. And just the way they go about that, the jump scares in that episode are effective. Like every time I watch that, I'm just creeped out by it. Like early on, we have them opening the closet door, and that little doll's head is just sitting there. And then we have the perspective of the little boy, the brother, I can't remember his name, but the baseball comes like rolling out, and then he's like playing, you know, toss with the ball, and we see it from his perspective, and then we see it from like the girl's perspective in the closet. And just the camera work in that episode is so great. And then there's this other scene where we see her in the window. The sister sees the supposed ghost in the window. And it's so effective how they do that, different places. And she's outside, right? And she's not supposed to be outside. And she comes through the salt circle, and we see that slow motion of her foot going across the salt. So, you know, we're just kind of there with Sam and Dean, and she's disrupting, right, all these expectations that we have of this is not how a ghost is supposed to act. And then, and then we have that, you know, revelation that it's this, you know, incestuous relationship. And like you said, Anne, you know, it's the humans, right? That's humans. I think Dean has a similar comment. It's like, he says something like, it's humans, it's humans, man, or something like that when he's talking to Sam. But that one I just think that was just, so well done. So I think that one probably has to be near the top. I'll also concur with Playthings. I think and I get a lot of these again. I think this is actually season 2. So I'm backing up a little bit, but again, the dolls are so creepy. We have the creepy imaginary friend, right? The girl, Maggie. And yeah, we have the grandmother or the sister who's up there in the attic. And we said about Psycho. It also reminds me of, if anyone's ever seen Burnt Offerings, like the original 70s film, I think, wasn't there like a person in the attic in that one, and the bad things were kind of happening. So and like you said too, Carol, that one I think Dean even makes the statement, oh, this is the haunted house one, right? This is the classic haunted house and the British accents, and I think he even makes a Scooby-Doo reference, right? That type of thing. So that was just a really good one. Also, I would say at the top of my list is Roadkill. I don't think anyone has mentioned that one yet. I think that's also season 2. And this is another one where kind of that trope of the ghost or human and like the human or ghost type things. But what I really like about that one is the woman in that episode, that's the one where she's out there on the highway, and it's been 15 years since she actually, her husband died in the car accident, and she doesn't know that she's dead. And they just do that so well. And that's the perfect mix of like frightening and sad to me, because at the end she has to realize that she needs to let go. And she has that great conversation with Sam where he says, some ghosts hold on because of love and some hold on because of hate. And they're kind of like tethered to the earth and they can't let go. And that twist, I think Supernatural does that twist ending so well. And that one always sticks to me because as a viewer, you're in it at the time and you're kind of with, I think it's Molly, is that her name? The woman.
So, yeah.
And yeah, you're with her like in that episode. And then when we find out that the brothers knew all along, and then we go back to that conversation and what Sam tells her, it's just, I don't know, it's like chilling to me to think about, someone who's a ghost and they don't know that they are, that's just, there's something about that. And I would say, I would probably agree too with Lola that Asylum probably is near the top of my list, just because again, the tropes, right? The creepy, I mean, how many times have we seen like even like a, Ghost Hunters episode or something like that with the abandoned asylum. And we think, oh, it's going to be kind of cheesy, but they do it so well. There's some great jump scares in there. The fact that it's the doctor, right? That he's the one that's still haunting the place and the patients just want help. So I would say probably those are like my top choices. Probably an unpopular opinion. And we could talk about this. And I know the Benders always makes the top, list. I don't find the Benders like scary if I'm using those criteria for, like I just mentioned for the other episodes. I find it thought-provoking. I find it memorable, but I don't find it that scary, if that makes sense. So I know that always makes like the top of list, but it's not one that kind of gives me like, oh, like chills, like I'm kind of hiding my face type scary, but it's scary in kind of a different way. So again, I think I love this theme, Gail, because, we could maybe talk about that, like what different ways to be scary. I think it's just fascinating. Yeah.
I agree that the Benders is scary in a different way.
In a different way. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because you can get killed by both, but there's a different type of fear that goes with those.
Yeah.
I think for me, Bloody Mary comes to the top of my list. I thought
I forgot to mention that one. That one is a great one. Yeah, totally scary.
It's totally scary. Who wasn't at a slumber party where people did that at some point, in your childhood? And the cinematography in that episode was done so well to enhance the scariness, because you know, the first time you watch these things, you're sucked in just watching the plot. But then on the 4th or 5th or 10th rewatch, you start to notice some of the other things. And the show was just shot so well, especially in those early seasons when they were shooting on film. And Bloody Mary, I just think the staging and everything was so well done. I loved No Exit, but I think that one was even scarier if you knew who H.H. Holmes was. And if you'd read Devil in the White
City.
Mhm.
And you knew about the murder house and you knew how evil this guy was, I think that brought a whole new level in that they didn't really have time to convey in the episode. Because I remember the first time I watched it, I went, H.H. Holmes, oh my gosh. Now they're in the big leagues. That was before we'd gotten to demons. I loved there were 2 episodes, I think, that really had scary psychiatric or sanitariums in them, asylum. And then the other one later on with the doctor with the plague masks, and the kid steals the plague mask and the doctor haunts him. Those are just scary, terrifying on so many levels. First, because we know that the real sanitariums did have some very dark past. The other thing is we've come to associate, and this goes to your Gothic, Melissa, the whole building style of those late Victorian sanitariums now has become a horror movie trope. And when you look at the building, you know to be scared because bad things are going to happen here.
Yeah.
It's kind of a shorthand. There, by the way, there's a fantastic webpage called the Asylum Project, and it tracks all of the closed and abandoned asylums in the United States and Canada, which I have used liberally in books. And then I think some of the other 2 they're a little underrated on scariness. Long Distance Call with the Crocata. It kind of gets glossed over, but remember the Crocatas have filth and they're in the basement of the phone building and they're all the bugs and all the roaches and the creature. When I did that for a rewatch, I thought, crap, this is really a good episode. Nobody ever remembers it, but it's actually scary. And time is on my side with the patchwork doctor who kind of put himself back together again when the pieces wore out. That was, there's just a body horror element with that was very scary when you stop to think about it. And then they put him in a refrigerator and chain it shut and bury him basically alive forever, which is harsh and terrifying on a whole new level. So yeah, and those are not the episodes that everybody always thinks of first, but I think they're pretty darn frightening.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
That as Melissa was talking about, once again, the earlier episodes, and I think what strikes me about one reason those episodes are intrinsically scarier, even the not super scary ones are nonetheless scarier and have more, even if an episode isn't scary as a whole, like let's say The Usual Suspects. Is that the one with Linda Blair? Yeah. And so the story wasn't also scary, but I found the Death Omen chick terrifying. You know, and so she was super scary. So even in episodes that aren't all throughout scary, had these really scary elements in them. And I think part of it, as we're talking about it, and this is all kind of cogitating in my head, is there's an intimacy in that fear. Those things are it's a very intimate kind of storytelling, and it's a very personal thing between us and the terrorizing object and us being the boys and everything, that the reason the later seasons don't have that is it's much more removed and it's much more abstract. When you start talking about demons and archangels, and there's some stuff, sure, you know, I mean, demons can be scary, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But it's not like what's in the closet, what's under the bed, you know, what is this, you know, what's in that dark room, what's going to happen in this empty building. Those are like really viscerally affecting moments that even, you know, from the get-go as kids, we start incalculating. And so by the time we're watching something like this and they're playing it so masterfully, and again with the filming, yes, because we're on film, we had that desaturated lighting, you know, so it was like a whole different kind of lighting thing that really enhanced some of these dark and mirrored and other, you know, elements of the vision. But it's a very intimate experience. And I think that's where we get a lot of basis of that fear, you know, in those first seasons.
Not to mention that being in a car with someone, especially in the dark or in the rain, that is an extremely intimate thing when you're in a car with somebody for a long time. And if you've ever driven through the night and you get some bad weather, or you get a detour, or the road's closed and you have to back up, those all make you very uncomfortable because you know this could go bad. And this is what the boys live in, you know, day after day. And so when we see them in that situation, there's a vulnerability to it. Yeah, they're big, strong guys with a bunch of weapons, but they're still in the dark, in the middle of nowhere, all by themselves. And that's scary. Yeah. So what about some of the episodes that were supposed to be scary, but just didn't land with you? Maybe they ended up being not scary, or maybe you laughed your whole way through them, or they just didn't hit you. Anne?
Oh, probably the Plucky penny whistle, the one where, you know, Sam is scared of the clowns, but it just was like, okay, Sam's scared of clowns. Let's just move on. You know, I mean, that one just didn't do it for me. Trying to think ones that were.
Yeah, I had 3 kids and spent a lot of time at Chuck E. Cheese, and I have no difficulty believing that there were satanic rituals in the basement. No. And somebody died in the ball pit, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, what was really, those ball pits do scare me. I mean, I think they're creepy, but you know.
There was too much humor in it for me to find it scary.
Yeah.
I mean, just a classic exchange between Sam and Dean, where he's like the ball washer.
Yeah.
The ball washer.
Dean makes him repeat it, and about the 3rd time, Sam finally gets it, you know, stuff like that. And, you know, chasing down the guy dressed as the lion and stuff. And it was too funny, you know.
Another one that I thought that probably should have been more scary was the one where the 3 college kids, the one guy gets bitten and he becomes a werewolf, and they film it all. I mean, they're filming everything about their lives anyway, and then they film that whole transition and everything, and where they, you know, the 2 guys they kill each other, and it's tragic, and it's sad, but I didn't find it scary in particular, that, you know, in the way that you would think it would be scary, that, you know, like a parent's worst nightmare kind of thing, for their kids going off to school, and, you know, not instead of baking pot brownies, they become a werewolf. You know, but it just, so that one didn't really scare me that much. And a lot of the later episodes with the big story arcs and stuff, you know, Lucifer and Sam taking on Lucifer, where he drinks all the demon blood and he's going to go, and they're going to use the rings and all that. And that's supposed to be scary. And that one didn't really scare me. And I think it's what y'all have been saying about the larger story arcs just aren't as scary as these more intimate moments. And that's just me, because I know a lot of people find the big scary things more frightening. And I'm not saying this very well. Carole, help me out.
Well, I think it's some of it is that removal, because when we're seeing demons and angels in our everyday life, we're not seeing demons and angels. And so we know that that's a fiction, and it's being played out on this very grand scale, but everybody's got a closet, you know? So to be able to relate to something being scary in the closet is much easier than being, oh my gosh, the Archangel Michael is going to take my body and use it to, you know, eradicate the earth. Okay. You know, and then depending on the humor, like you say with Plucky, I think you have the humor. You know, I found, for instance, it's much scarier in Plush when Sam's in the elevator and that guy is wearing that horrible ratty clown costume and he gets in, you know, and Sam's just standing there and eyes get really big and the guy's just standing there like looking at him, and then he turns around, you know, and that was terrifying. That, you know, 10 seconds in the elevator where Sam is confronting this horrible vintage battered clown and didn't even have a knife dripping blood by that point or something.
Yeah, because he had killed the other guy.
Yeah, that was
in the hospital.
scary. The laughing clowns with the water flowers and the glitter was not scary, but that was scary. Plush was a scary episode, I thought.
It was, yeah.
You know, with the ratty, you know, the big bunny head, and nobody knew why these people were doing what they were doing, and you know. But I think the scale makes a big difference, and how far our curtain of disbelief is willing to rise, you know.
Yeah, I think the one that made me feel more sad than scared was in one of the later seasons. There's the fly people with the big heads, the Mosca, and they had the veil over the head. Charlie's in it.
Yeah.
And the thing that made that stand out in my mind is it's really a story about alienation, and he was cast out from his people, but then in the end his people came and brought his body back, so he wasn't completely cut off. And it was more of a tragic episode. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, maybe you're in a big city, but surely somebody at a bus stop is going to give a guy who's got a fly head a second look. Even in New York, they might not say anything, but I think they'd notice. And but there was a pathos to it that actually elevated it from being silly. And I was impressed that they could make me care for a guy with a big fly head, because Jeff Goldblum couldn't. So, you know, kudos to them for making that happen. Melissa, how about you?
Yeah, I can't think of like one, but I find it fascinating again that we're talking about like places in different episodes where we remember being, you know, truly scared. And I think that when you mentioned Charlie, like that episode where the Steins, right? And I can't think, oh my gosh, what I'm blanking on the episode title where she's killed. But like I didn't particularly find that episode, you know, I was riveted by it, you know, and the danger, but then, you know, I just remember feeling, you know, and I know there's a lot of debate too about sort of, you know, how she went out and how she was killed. And she was, you know, absolutely terrified, and she was there by herself, and, you know, Sam's on the phone and all this. And so, I mean, there's that point too, where we feel, and I remember feeling, I mean, watching that episode and just, it was terrifying and difficult to watch, because I could feel like her fear in that moment. But, you know, the whole episode itself, I wasn't necessarily scared by it. So I think that's, again, you know, an interesting point, what comes out in different episodes. And the Plush is a great example too, you know, with that one, where again, that idea, and I think maybe we're bringing ourselves in, like, you know, okay, what do I do if I'm in an elevator, you know, if that would ever happen, right? But, you know, that type of thing where, you know, you're in an elevator with this incredibly weird, you know, maybe person there with you, and you're trapped, you know. It's that idea, like we talked about earlier, this idea of control, you know, or like being, like you said, Gail, being lost in the dark in a car, and you know, you don't know where you are, and you've lost that sense of control. So I think those are, you know, kind of important, you know, important moments as well.
You know, one of the episodes that deserves some of the heat it gets, but really scared me for personal reasons was Route 666. You got the haunted truck, And yeah, they bungled some things with that episode. But that one chilled me because when we first moved to Richmond, Virginia in the late 90s, we moved there a week after there had been a high-profile missing person on a country road near Charlottesville. And there, people had reported seeing a black truck trying to make solo drivers, especially women, pull over. And they thought that's what must have happened to her. And they never did solve that case. And it's been, 25 years. And so when there was this episode about a black truck that follows you on the highway and tries to run you off the road, it's just like ripped from the headlines, a little too close here. So I think we also bring that into what we think is scary and what isn't. It can be very personal on what scares you. Lola, were there any that made you laugh instead of gasp, or just didn't land with you as being scary?
In general, most of the episodes that involved vampires bored me because their vampires tended to be like snotty brats. They've been vampires for a minute and they're like, yo, let's go see if we could get some blood, man. And I'm like, oh God, please stop. So, I grew up on Dracula. Now he was scary because he lived in an old castle and he was like 1,000 years old and he had long stringy hair and long fingernails, and it might end up in a casket for 1,000 years or buried, in dirt or something. That was scary. But these like, oh my God, I'm a vampire. No. And then, I read Interview with the Vampire and all that stuff in the early 90s. And then, you're up to like New Orleans, French Quarter in the 1800s. And, everyone's all debonair, but you never know what's really going on until you're invited to the masquerade ball. And it turns out to be a group of vampires with a Y. And that's more exciting. And then, once again, you come to these vampires and they're like, brah, should we go out and get some blood tonight? Yeah, man. And I'm like, no, next.
Just not classy enough vampires for you.
No, they're boring.
I wanted to come back to you, Melissa, because you had said something earlier that you wanted to explore a little more. Can you get us started on that one?
Yeah, I think, and Carole, I think you mentioned, you mentioned that too. It's just, it bothered me because I was looking through, I knew, this panel was coming up, and it bothered me that I couldn't really name a really like scary from, I would say start to finish, but just the majority, like those season 1 episodes where you sit there and 45 minutes go by and you're just like, what, I haven't blinked, or whatever, that type of thing. And I just, and I think you mentioned this, that, in those later episodes, I just couldn't find one, and I don't know if I'm missing anything, but I just couldn't find one of those episodes where I was just scared from start to finish. And like I said, just like with Charlie, I had those moments of tension, or I feel the characters' fear, like I feel what Sam and Dean are going through. But I think it's fascinating what we've said, this conversation about the personal. Like I'm not really, it doesn't draw on my fears. I'm feeling for them. I'm not really fear myself. So I don't know. I can't even really formulate what I wanted to say about that, but I think we have touched on it. It's just interesting. I think, this first few seasons, it does draw on like what we are afraid of, our own personal fears, or like the collective, like you said, the urban legends that we've all heard some form of it, and we're bringing that into it. So yeah, and just the later episodes, I just can't, it still bothers me. Like I can't find an episode that really just, scared me from start to finish. So yeah, so I'm not really describing what I wanted to say all that well, but that's the type of thing. It does seem some sort of like, there's like a shift or a movement where we kind of, I don't know, like after like season 5, 5 or 6, like we kind of moved from that, and it's just them, it goes on, they need to find new material. And like you said, Carole, we're dealing with the angels and the demons and kind of the big bads, right? That time, like I didn't find the Leviathan scary, you know, what they were doing was scary, but I didn't find them scary, you know, in and of themselves. And like Lola said, with the vampires, I mean, the vampire that comes to my mind is Benny. And, you know, he's memorable for he's not, you know, he has the potential, right, to be scary and dangerous, but then I just feel overwhelming sympathy, you know, when I think about Benny. And it's not, there he is a vampire, you know, so it's interesting how they they disrupt maybe our expectations for some of those things. But yeah, there's no real focus point there, sorry.
No, that covers a lot of good stuff. Well, believe it or not, folks, we've blown through our time again. This goes so fast.
Wow.
Yes.
Carole still has her list. Okay, Carole, give us a quick rundown. What didn't we hit?
The only 2 episodes I liked and the later ones that were scary was Plush and Safe House. I thought
Yes.
Safe House was really scary.
That's a good one.
because
That's a good
there-
one.
Once again, it's that whole other world bordering on our world, and we don't know what's going on. And I agree about the vampires not being scary. Not that there can't be redneck vampires. I'm down with the redneck vampires, but there was I don't know, there's too many, but the alpha vamp, he was scary.
Yeah.
He was scary.
That's
He
true.
had that
Yeah.
power, that quiet power and command to be scary. And that's
Yeah.
it. I'm done.
The other one with the house with was it Annie, the foxhole lady, with the guy keeping the ghosts in the
Yeah,
old
that was pretty
hotel, and
creepy.
Bobby was a ghost, and I thought that one was very well done, and it was a very good traditional ghost story. Also, from the perspective of 2 ghosts who are watching the live people and the ghosts.
And they were creeped out. As ghosts, they were creeped out.
Yeah.
I thought that one was well done.
Yeah, that was a well done
Awesome.
episode.
Yes. All right. Well, folks, there's no end to talking about scary stuff with Supernatural, but thank you so much. Let's go around again, let everybody know where they can find you online, starting with you, Melissa.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, so you can find me, Melissa Edmundson. I have a website, also my name, where you can find some of the books and the things that I've done. So yeah, check me out there.
Great. Lola? Lola?
And my bandwidth had cleared up. Now I'm frozen again. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I am Lola Lariscy. You can find me at Lola Lariscy on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, but I don't really do it that much because I just don't take that many pictures. Facebook under my Muggle name, which is Lola Strickland, and also under Lola Lariscy, and lots of other places. Just look me up, you'll find me.
Sounds good. Anne?
I'm on Facebook a lot, and it's Ann Wicker, and I'm also on Team Free Will NC a lot, Gail's Supernatural group. And you can find me on Instagram as Ann.Wicker2, and Twitter, Ann Wicker, no spaces.
Sounds good. Carole?
On Facebook, you could find me at the TFWNC group, and on ConTinual as Carole Stokes or Carole M Stokes. I'm on Twitter as true_firesign10. All my fiction is on AO3 under firesign10. And that's where I'm at.
I'm pretty easy to find at gailcmartin.com, morganbryce.com. All the social media is a variation of those names. I also do run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook, and I'm a columnist for the Winchester Family Business blog. And but most of the time you can find me here on ConTinual. So thank you all so much for coming out to play tonight. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up on ConTinual, so we'll see you online.